Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about how restaurant executives make decisions and how they work together to optimize their technology stack. We've got a couple of board members or a couple of panel speakers. Used to my podcast, but we'll get into the introduction and we'll go from there. But in the recent Nation's Restaurant News, 75% of operators have said that technology plays a critical or very important role in their decision-making process. So today we're going to talk about that. We're going to decipher how executives are making decisions and 3 key takeaways. Number 1, why alignment across the team members and the departments is important. Number 2, how they prioritize technology decision-making. And then number 3, what are the 3 biggest pitfalls to avoid when you're going through that channel. Being here today, it's been an incredible journey, and I'm overwhelmed with gratitude to be surrounded by some of the top minds in the industry. So people like Wade Allen, people like Leon. Unfortunately, Pankaj couldn't be here, but people like Pankaj, and having their input in what we're doing and taking their feedback and implementing it in the restaurant industry. We're going to start with alignment. So each of you has had to get your leadership and your team and your departments on the same stage, on the same page, and trying to get them to buy into these get alignment on these strategies that you're putting forward. So Wade, maybe you could start off. Well, first of all, why is it important to get alignment when you're implementing these changes?
Yeah, I mean, we all know it as technologists. You can't it's really hard to charge a hill by yourself. And so in the time that I've been in the industry, and I've been head of innovations, CIO, CTO for a while, and now in a president role. I learned early on in my career that you've got to make friends with people who in the past had been viewed as enemies. And that's a weird thing to say, but for years, and we'll talk about some of this, I think, later in the dialogue, but marketing and tech hadn't always been on the same page. And so what I found early on in my career is if I can get alignment from a handful of my peers on the executive team or in the business, then going to get the rest of the team on board is a much easier conversation, right? But just trying to go it alone was really, really difficult. So what it came down to was canvassing doors. So for example, if we had a big idea that we thought was going to materially impact operations, and it was a technical implementation, it was going to take some time, the first person I would go to was our head of operations and say, look, we're boiling up this idea. We think it's a big deal. What do you think? You get their feedback. You kind of bounce it off of them. They're going to have thoughts that may not be exactly what you're thinking, but you kind of morph into this idea of say, okay, I think I can still use that tech. We can implement it in a slightly different way. Now let's both of us go and get the CEO on board, right? Or the president on board. Or let's go get the CMO to engage with us and go to the next level. And that has served me well. I call it canvassing doors, right? It's a senator walking around, knocking on different doors and sharing the plan before you share the plan in the boardroom. That tends to work the best when we have a big tech initiative that we know could have an impact, but you want to make sure it's not vetoed on the proverbial Senate floor before it gets too far, right?
Leon, how's your experience? So I know you're in the midst of a few big initiatives. So run us through, why is it important to get buy-in? Let's focus on the why, and why is it critical to start there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very important question. And as you know, if you think back at IT, right, like 10, 20 years ago, IT was all about break fix, right? And now the IT department is sort of moving into the center of the organization, right? Like everything we do has an IT component, and not just from a break fix standpoint, but also from a strategic standpoint. So the way I see my role is that I bring people in for the ride, just kind of like what Wade was saying, right? I bring them in for a ride. If it's a marketing tool that I'm looking for, then obviously I bring the CMO into it. I talk to them about the vision. I get their feedback on what they feel about the tool and where their department is headed. And if it's the right fit, then great. If it's the wrong fit and they don't understand, then so you have to do a lot of explaining, and you can't speak geek speak, because you'll lose your audience
they'll be
within
gone.
2 seconds, right?
Yeah.
So within my role and even Steven's role, he's in the room somewhere, who's my number 2, you have to speak like a business person, right? You don't have to speak like an operator, but you have to speak like a business person, and that'll go a long way. Because I think a lot of IT leaders fail because they speak from a very technical standpoint, and I don't think their point gets across sometimes.
I think it's important. His point is really important because it's a pressure test too. You'll know early on if you're trying to bring a technology to a marketer and they're like, what are you saying to me? I don't understand anything that you're talking about. You're going to be like, okay, either I'm explaining this incorrectly or there's too much here to explain for them to actually get it. This isn't going to work, right? So back to why it's important, because stuff will get killed on the cutting floor before it ever gets to where it needs to if you don't sell it incorrectly or you don't actually have the partners to go and make it work. And then you waste time, money, effort, because you get it all the way down the path and it gets vetoed, and now you're left with engaging a vendor, engaging a partner, bringing everybody else along, and it doesn't get out the door, right?
And I think that's exactly why it makes you different, because you look at it, I think that is your special trait, is you look at it from a business perspective. What objective is it going to solve? What is it going after? What are the problems that it's going to solve versus let's geek out on the technology? So perfect.
It's fun to geek out. It doesn't work out.
Exactly, yeah. Perfect. So let's go into how. Both of you, Leon, you guys are primarily franchise. You've got a handful of corporate stores. Wade, I think you're sort of half and half in between. So now let's talk about how you go about getting the franchisees, all of those guys involved, because now you've got your leadership team. How do you extend out to the franchisees and the team there?
Yeah, I'll have Leon take the first swing at this.
So the formula is very simple, right? It's very simple, but it's also very complex. Franchisees are in the business of making money, right? So if you're rolling out a tool and you want to bring the franchisees on board, then speak their speak, right? Talk to them about ROI, talk to them about efficiency gains that then also contributes to the bottom line. And if those things don't exist, if you're not saving the franchisee money or bringing in efficiency into his operations, then that's not a project that you should probably take on. Now, on the security standpoint, it's a whole other problem, right? Because like I don't even want to deal with security and expenses and those things, but those are like must-have insurance plans, right? That's how I approach those. But as far as like operations or marketing projects or anything else, I always do a test, use our company locations. We have some franchisees that also are very hungry to test stuff. So we bring them on board also. We sponsor the test so that they don't have anything out of pocket. Now, if they have to do wiring and stuff like that, they'll spend that $1,000 to get the wiring in. But as far as the actual expense of the test, we sponsor it. And then if the results are good and we're seeing an ROI, then we share that result with the franchisees, and then off you go. So it always comes back to just approaching everything from a businessman standpoint, and that's been successful for me at least.
Wade, what do you have to add?
Yeah, I mean, Leon hit it on the head. It's either the cost of doing business or it's to grow the business, their bottom or top line. That's usually how franchise are thinking, and so. When we're doing tests, you got to speak their language. I think the biggest thing I've learned through technology as I've progressed in my career is being able to speak to people and where they are in their position. So if it's a franchisee, talk about what matters to them. If it's a marketer, talk about what matters to them. If it's the finance guy, talk about what matters to the finance people, right? But too many technologists are so stuck in, I'm the CTO or I'm the CIO or I'm the VP of technology, and so I've got to talk about Kubernetes and containerization and whatever. And you're like, guys, nobody understands that other than you guys. Explain what it means. Redundancy. Yeah. It's going to be up. It's going to run. We're going to take money faster. Whatever the terms you use, you got to engage people on where they sit as opposed to trying to bring them over to be the IT guy. And Leon hit it on the head with the franchise partners. Is it going to, if it's a cost of doing business from a security standpoint, then it's also a conversation to say this is going to protect your business because it's an insurance policy. Okay, I understand that. If the next one is this marketing solution will actually drive top line, which ultimately, if you hold your P&L solid, it'll bring to your bottom line as well. Hey, that's a conversation I want to have, right? So I think that's how I look at when I talk to my franchise partners.
So it sounds like I always say these three most important things with the restaurateurs. If it doesn't increase top line revenue, if it doesn't reduce cost, and if it doesn't impact efficiency, then forget it. No one's going to do it. So it sounds like you're all aligned with those three simple rules and strategies. Perfect. Well, let's move on to prioritization of technology and how do you guys prioritize that? I'd like to actually move to the next slide and show you the ecosystem. So there is no shortage of technology vendors here in the restaurant space. You guys are big, hot commodities. I'm sure 400 people here want to speak with you. How do you begin to start prioritizing what to focus on and where does it fit into the whole ecosystem of your brands? So either of you can start. Wait, we'll start with you.
By the way.
Yeah.
That is so hard. Like as an operator, I mean, it's so hard to decipher all of that tech. For me, it's always been about, okay, before I jump down that chart, what are we trying to accomplish? What's the strategy that we want to do in order to accomplish the metrics or the success? And once you kind of have that clear in your head, then you can then go to that chart and go, okay, who are the players, right? Because then you're immediately eliminating a portion of that chart to where you only have to focus on, okay, I'm just talking about my MarTech stack. And what I ultimately want to do is to send the right message to the right person with the right offer. Okay, so who does that, right? And what does that look like? And is it an all-in-one solution or am I cobbling together multiple solutions through integration? But if you don't start with a strategy, you're left with just staring at that thing and randomly picking the technology folk that are probably all really great at what they do, but let's be honest, trying to integrate that spaghetti mess is going to be really, really tough. Always going to be tough.
Leon, what about how do you go about that?
I think the most interesting thing about that chart is that there's probably just as many logos that are left off than are probably on
Agreed,
it.
100%.
That's probably half of them,
So
or a
that's,
third of them.
That's, yeah. But you know, the way I approach things, first of all, is that you know, businesses always want to get your 3 and 5 year plan. In technology, there's no such thing as 3 or 5 year plan. Maybe there's a vision of where you want to go, but the way I approach it is that every year I sort of think about what do I want to accomplish this year from a technology standpoint. And I don't mean the boring stuff. I mean the things that are going to make a difference at the store level, right? And as I roll out the technology, I'm always kind of, you know, checking off the box with the thing that I just rolled out and kind of pushing I'm always looking at a year. So it's like I don't plan my year from January to January or November, whatever your planning period is. I'm constantly planning a year ahead, right? Because like as soon as you do this thing, there's another thing that you probably want to put ahead of it. So that's how I approach it. But as far as picking technology, I just recently with Jim, our president, did a talk about the 4 Fs of how we select technology and vendors and whether or not the technology is even the right fit for us and things like that. And I can go through that, but
Sure.
I'll end up taking up your whole time.
Well, no,
So,
actually, let's briefly touch on that. So what are the 4 Fs?
the 4 Fs, and there's a lot of 4-letter words in there. So so the first one is that, is the technology a good fit for the brand, right? It might be the right solution for restaurants, but is it a good fit for the brand? The second F is that, is the technology for real or is it a fad? Like, you know, dynamic pricing, right? For a while it was like the hottest thing, and then everyone fell flat on their face, and I don't know where it is, but I don't like dynamic pricing, and I knew it was going to be a fad. The third one, so we talked about fit, fad. Is it no? Is it going to fix something? Because if it doesn't fix something, then what's the point of you rolling it out, right? Because you could be spending your time on technology that's going to fix something. And the fourth one is I forget what the F was, but it goes back to the ROI, right? Is it going to pay for itself? Is it going to contribute, right? Because if let's say you bring in this labor management solution that costs you $1,000 a month and it saves you $1,000 a month. Well, what have you accomplished? You haven't accomplished anything. For you to bring it in, it needs to save you. You at least need to get $1,500 worth of benefit from it, or something like that, where you go, okay, I just added to my efficiency, right? It's like there's no point in rolling something out where it's gonna leave you exactly where you are from a financial standpoint.
Excellent. Moving on, let's talk about technology. It always has been technology or marketing. Wade, you just briefly touched base on it, but I want to go back and drill more into that because it feels like everything's now becoming, as you also mentioned, technology and IT is becoming the center of the entire operation and organization. So now it's morphing into technology and marketing. The two are working hands in hand together. Also in the same NRN report, the high cost of technology and lack of IT budget has been also a top concern for a lot of operators, but now it's also going into the budget of marketing. So right now, the top 4 objectives in the restaurant sites is improving profitability by increasing traffic, improving marketing and guest communication. And on the other side, they're trying to reduce costs and rightfully so reduce labor costs considering everything that's going in this space. So let's talk about, Wade, you've got a pretty deep expertise and experience in the marketing side of things. So run us through how marketing was done prior to this point.
So I actually got in the restaurant space. I came from agency world and retail. And I actually was a marketer, classically trained marketer, did B school, but that's where I came from. But I kind of dabbled in technology. And I wish I could have said that I knew, I didn't know, but I wish I could say that I knew that marketing was going to be, the whole backbone was going to be technology at some point in my career. I didn't know that. But now it became clear for me about the time the iPhone landed and about the time, just after kind of 2008, 2009, 2010, I started to see that industry shift pretty hard. And today, I think, when I look back early in my career, the CIO and the CMO were not going to lunch together. They were not hanging out together. They were like, there actually was a little bit of a tug of war going on. And I remember when I first got to Brinker in 2014, I was on the marketing side. I was the VP of digital marketing. And I watched this tug of war happen between the CIO, who was a former accountant, who is now running the technology team, and the CMO, who was very traditional CMO. Big brand advertising, television all the way, and this weird dynamic. And I sat somewhere in between, where both of them were coming to me and asking me questions about what we should be doing in Google, what we should be doing in SEO, and how we should be doing some of this loyalty stuff. And then you fast forward to where we are today. Everything that is really powerful, traceable, trackable, accountable is based on the technology that underpins marketing. So we're in a different world today where without tech, marketing is not going to survive. And I think we've realized that now. And now when you go out and you look in the market as a president now, and I look out to fill marketing roles, they have to understand tech. They don't have to be they don't have to have a CS degree or an IT degree, but they have to be able to know and understand how technology is going to help their marketing be better. Otherwise, they're not the right person for the fit. And I think it's only going to get more and more that way in the future.
Leon, I'll let you answer that, and I want to circle back around to this topic. We're going to spend a few minutes on that.
I mean, it's interesting, right? So my undergrad was in marketing. And I won't tell you why I did marketing for my undergrad, but there's a funny story behind that. But when I was doing the reason why I bring this up is that when I was doing my undergrad, there was a lot of walking around and surveying people and then, capturing those results, putting it into SPSS to get insights,
Yeah,
right?
I remember doing this.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. When was the last time you surveyed any of your customers? Probably. I mean, maybe you survey them on their experience at your restaurant to find out how you're doing and what you can improve on. But as far as their likes and dislikes, no one's surveying them, right? So it's all kind of going through tech, and our CDB providers in the room also, and they were a game changer for us, like an absolute game changer for us through the credit card tokenization and sure, you don't know who exactly the customer is, and I don't really care about that so much, but I do care about how they're behaving and how their behavior is shifting over time. So those things are important to me. And so as it pertains to marketing and tech, it's like, is a CDP implementation a tech project or a marketing project. It's probably both, which is why I feel like technology is the nucleus of the organization, right? Because, although marketing wants a CDP, there's also a tech backend that can also affect the how effective the CDP is, right? If it's got all the bells and whistles for marketing, but it isn't doing anything from an integration standpoint or data collection standpoint, then you're not getting good data. So that's essentially it.
Yeah, and actually had spoken to another IT operation / marketing person, and they mentioned the same thing, that IT has to roll up to marketing now because it's such an integral part of that. So Wade, let's go back around the circle. We've talked about how it should be done, or how it has been done. Let's talk about how should it be done. So going forward, what do you see in the future for restaurant marketing?
Yeah, I wish that Pankaj would have made this this presentation.
Absolutely,
Right?
and actually maybe a brief introduction. So Wade and Pankaj worked together at Brinker. They built this entire ecosystem around it. They utilized it to launch It's Just Wings, and there's a huge success story behind that. So with that, a quick intro, I'll let you.
I will caveat, we had nothing to do with the future success that they have today. Brinker's killing it. Chili's is running fast. That had nothing to do with me. But prior to that, we did a lot of heavy lifting 10 years into that with Pankaj. And when I got to Brinker, I realized really quickly, in order to be successful as a marketer, I needed to have a counterpart in IT that was running with me and that I could go to lunch with, that we could meet after hours, we could talk through stuff, we could bang stuff off a whiteboard and know what we were digging into before we presented it to the broader team. And so I would encourage all marketers, whenever I talk at marketing conferences, I'm telling them, find your tech counterpart and take them to lunch and buy them Christmas gifts. It's like a quarterback buying for his offensive line. Make sure those guys are taken care of because they're going to block for you every day. The IT guys, it made me more successful having a partner. And even Nathan Huber that's here today, he was a partner with me as we were there. We figured it out together because I could see where we needed to go as an organization, but I didn't have the technical necessary know-how to get there, but those guys did. And they didn't always see the future unless I could explain it to them, and then they got it, and then we could go and present it. So it was a great partnership. And I think that the future will be more of that. It will be partnerships being made in these different microcosms in the business with tech, because tech is the nucleus of everything we do today. I'm finding more and more in boardrooms, when you sit around the room, 70% of the conversation ultimately comes back to what's the technology helping us be successful. And if you don't know that, I don't know what future CEOs and board members look like in 10, 15, 20 years if they don't know tech. I really don't know what that looks like.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Leon, what are your takes? What's gonna change in the restaurant marketing? I have my own take on that, but I'm also coming from this side. I'm coming from a consumer and also a technology provider, but where do you think this is going?
Listen, I think that for a brand to survive, and I don't care who you are, for a brand to survive, you have to leverage data, right? If you're not leveraging your data and reading it and understanding it, because things are moving so fast that it's hard to keep up with what's happening, right? So from a marketing standpoint, if you're not looking at your data and you're looking at data from a two-dimensional standpoint, then you're gonna lose, right? The train is already moving. You might be able to run and get on top, get in there, but the train's picking up speed. So just like Wade said, become best friends with your CMO. If you're on the marketing side, become best friends with your IT counterpart. Our CMO, luckily, is like my favorite human ever. I golf with him all the time. We're always hanging out together, and it makes things so much easier. And I'll give you an example. I mean, it's not so much this, but I want to go into Web3, right? And I've been trying to do that for the past year and a half, but I want it to be purposeful, right? I don't want to just say Dave's Hot Chicken's in Web3 in some shape or form. I want it to kind of turn into a transaction. And our CMO in the beginning, well, he understood Web3. He's like, well, do we really go in there now? It's kind of like an early adopter thing. And so he and I sat down and we talked about it. And he goes, okay, let's do it. That makes sense. Let's do it because our demographic is so young that they're already in there. So why not meet them there? And that's how I convinced Olo to help us write an integration to our Web3 provider. And that's how I convinced our CMO to do it, because I said, listen, these young kids are gaming, right? And they're gaming, and if they're not using VR, they're gonna be using VR, and they're gonna be hungry, and they need to order food, and that's where we need to be. And then it just completely unlocked everything. So now it's like, okay, well, how do we make sense of Web3? Because we're still trying to answer that question.
Interesting, yeah. And I think we're not even going to begin the conversation of AI, because I feel restaurants are just so far behind the curve on that. Most restaurants don't even have a CDP platform. They don't even know who their customers are. They don't have any analytics. Right. And if you have no data, then just ignore the whole AI wave. But back to your point, that freight train is picking up speed, and it's going to make such a massive gap between the bottom half of the industry and then the top 2, 3, 4% that are just absolutely going to crush it because of things like this. Personalized transactions has a 6-time higher ROI than non-personalized transactions. 70% of customer visits are because of personalized promotions. And by the way, when I say promotions, I don't mean discounts, coupon, free food, this, that. It could be a newsletter. Like, how many in the room actually send out a newsletter on a regular basis? Anyone? 3, 4? Yeah, so it could be just that. Or it could be, hey, you came in and you tried our chicken sandwich. You should try the spicy chicken sandwich next time, because if you love this, you're absolutely going to love that. And constantly communicating with the customers. I have 2 or 3 favorite restaurants that I go to, and I know what their data, I know their information behind the scene, and I spend twice as much as their normal customers. I have yet to hear anything from them. And when I walk in there, I'm treated just like everybody else, and I have to wait 45 minutes in line just to get a table. When if they had some sort of a CDP, they could have immediately, right off the bat, say, oh, Mr. Mazrouei, we have a 45-minute wait. Considering you're a VIP customer, I'll get you seated in the next 2-3 minutes. Imagine the impact that that's going to have on that customer, because that customer that is spending twice as much is twice as profitable. They leave twice as much tip. So it's crazy to me that restaurants are still treating their customers just like everybody else, irrespective of that. And all of you have experienced this when you go to the airline industry, when you check into the hotel, right? All the free upgrades that you get, the priority access, things like that must come into the restaurant industry, and that is going to be a huge game changer between those who do it and those who don't do it. And it all gets unlocked with the power of the CDP, the customer data, all the information you have about your customers. So let's move on. Leon, you've been quoted to invest heavily in technology. You've mentioned it a couple of times, ROI, and you're always a big opponent of invest in technology with positive ROI. You mentioned $1,000, etc. So let's drill into that. And then, how much technology is too much technology?
There's definitely a law of diminishing returns.
By the way, don't forget that.
Yeah, there's definitely a law of diminishing returns, right? There's so much you could do before you start seeing the drop off, right? So I think you have to be very cognizant of that, right? Because sometimes I see organizations that are just chasing after the one problem, right? And they keep throwing stuff at it. And so you have to look at the organization with a multitude of problems, right? You have to identify all the problems. And then when it comes to technology or technology implementations, right? I look at, they use the number 10, and that's a true statement. I look at the 10 things that I could be doing with the 10 partners that each serve each pain point. And then I select the 2 that are going to help the organization the most, right? And that might be a boring project, but what do? You got to get through that. But that's essentially what I do. And so once I solve a problem, I move on to another one. I don't try to enhance enhance whatever it is that I'm doing there with another system, right? It's like, let's say you have an issue with guest accuracy, like with order accuracy, right? You put in a system or a process or whatever it is to help order accuracy, and then I move on to solve another problem. Because what you want to do is you want to bake in that system or that process and see what the long-term effects are, right? Because immediately you're going to see a lot of, because everyone's engaged and everyone's watching you, so you're going to see a huge improvement. And then over time, people just, things get normal and then people start kind of falling off. But you want to see where things plateau before you come and layer in another set of technologies to solve the order accuracy issue. So that's how essentially how I solve the too tech or not too tech problem, right? Just there's so many problems to solve, just move on to the next one, solve that, come back to this one, reassess, and then if something needs to happen, just keep innovating.
Wade, what is your take in this?
Well, before I make my comment, how many are vendor, supplier, partners, like technology people in the room? Raise them high so I can see them. Okay.
Marketing automation.
Okay. Justin is marketing automation.
We know Justin.
So I don't think this is an offensive comment, but I'll just make it. It's technology does not solve everything. As an operator, I have 600 emails, 40 phone calls, whatever it is throughout the course of a week of somebody trying to tell me some technology is going to solve a problem we have in a restaurant. And the reality is they probably all have a place to help solve a problem. But I don't have 600 problems going on at any given time. And so my point is that there are certain technologies in a certain year with the budget that I'm given that I can tackle. But yes, there's a lot of technology, right? Given that budget, given the limited scope that I have in order to solve that problem, I then often think the tech will get me part of the way there. But then I need my operations team or my finance team or my marketing team to embrace that technology and utilize it to its fullest extent. And that's where I see the breakdown happening across the entire restaurant space, is that we get a piece of technology and we put it in and it's going to solve missing and incorrect, right? Any operator in the room, I've got a missing and incorrect issue and this is going to solve it. And guess what? It doesn't really solve it because the team members didn't do the training, or we didn't roll it out correctly, or they don't understand it, or it wasn't communicated effectively, or we didn't hold them accountable, right? So I guess what I ultimately getting after with the question is, too much technology. There is a lot of technology. I think that you can't have the expectation that tech will solve every problem all the time. A lot of it is only going to get you 50% of the way there, and then it's the change curve you have to work on, and that is really, really hard.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think Wade said something that's golden here, because and it's happened to me too. A lot of times you have buy-in from corporate on, like, everyone at the corporate level about this piece of technology that's supposed to solve a problem, and then you roll it out to the store, and then, like, for instance, one time we rolled out this piece of technology where they required the expo person to look at an iPad, right? So they have their expo screen and then they have the iPad. Guess what? Every Friday afternoon, that iPad would break. Literally, every week, it would break. And Steven's smiling there because he knows what I'm talking about. And there's a component of this where you have to make sure that the folks that are supposed to be using it are also in on the plan and they've bought into it. Because when you roll something out and they vote that they're not going to use it, then the whole project just ends up dying. And I don't care how many people you fire, I don't know, you suspend, it doesn't matter. If they've decided they're not going to use it, the project's dead. So you also have to bring in the operators from the stores and get their buy-ins.
And if you try to roll too much of that year after year, they eventually just wave the white flag and say, I'm not going to do any of it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care what you gave me. Now I'm just going to show up and do it the way I want to do it. And then you've got basically the culture of optional going on throughout all your restaurants.
Yeah.
So I love this conversation because I think it's really, really important for operators. If most operators in the room are probably nodding their heads going, we know this conversation, right? Because it's the battle that we deal with every single day. But limited amount of tech into a restaurant to solve those problems, and then make sure that tech is agreed upon, adhered to, trained, and adopted by the organization before you move to the next thing. Otherwise, it'll be a scattering of tech to solve all these problems. They ended up not solving any problems, and now you're in trouble.
Yeah, and if Pankaj was here, he would absolutely touch base on, because I'm big. Obviously, I come from the marketing side and all of that, and I'm focusing 100% on customer experience. How do you drive top line revenue, etc. But he always says, don't forget the employees as well. Employee experience is just as important, and never underestimate the power of convenience for those frontline workers, and ensuring that the technology makes it in the hands of the frontline worker. Because if I'm going into the restaurant and I'm trying to check in and she's adding me and she's still asking me for my phone number, first name and last name to join the wait list, even though I've been there 15 times, if you just don't give that technology to the frontline worker, it's like, why did you put it in place? So in agreement 100%. What do you think, before we get to this pitfalls, what are the innovations coming down? What do you think what are the main innovations that IT, operations, and marketing should be aware of in the next, let's keep it in a short time span, next 12 to 24 months?
Well, I can mention the one we talked about at the beginning. So we have cameras in our restaurant today, security cameras or cameras that are watching what's going on. But I don't have that linked up to my guest feedback or sentiment tool, and I don't have any audio. I think in the next 12 to 18 months, those three are going to come together with integration. So when I have a problem, I can pull that problem and I can see the footage and the audio from what actually went on, which allows me not to have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars of secret shopper programs or send my franchise business consultants out there that end up getting rolled out the red carpet and everything looks beautiful when they show up, but the moment that they leave, it all goes back to the way the prisoners start running the prison again, right? So sorry, that's a bad analogy. I love our restaurant.
It's a good
analogy. I love my operators.
Like
I do. I don't want that. Can we erase that from the footage? I don't want that. But the point is,
that'll be the first thing that'll go on social media. Connie, please mark the points. Yeah.
Alan, don't put that on social media. But I do think that tech is not that far away.
Sure.
Like those three can come integrated.
Leon, what's on the horizon?
It's, similar to what Wade said, right? So, and it's already happening, but it's going to become more widespread within the restaurant industry. Today, you have a negative guest experience, right? Let's say with food. And then if you're lucky, you scour your surveillance system to find that transaction, to find out exactly what happened. I think what's going to end up happening is that very soon, these cameras are going to get really smart and allow you to get to that exact item that the guest said was either undercooked, overcooked, or whatever. And you're going to be able to see that transaction right there without having to search for anything. So I think it's going to make the restaurant a lot more connected in a lot of different ways, right? And I don't want to touch on AI, but like the Vision AI technology, although I don't feel like it's mature enough for restaurants quite yet. Maybe it is for the Chipotles of the world where you're building things in a linear fashion. But for the rest of us, I don't think Vision AI is there. But once it reaches maturity, huge game changer.
Yeah, it'll be a game. AI will absolutely the impact that it's having already at big enterprises. It's mind-boggling.
I think it's the practical application, though. Right?
Agreed,
I think we get caught up in AI and like ChatGPT and some other stuff, which, by the way, I use it all the time. But and I know a lot of us do when we're writing or doing stuff. But I think the applications are what's going to be truly remarkable in restaurants. How does it empower the frontline staff to make decisions faster and more accurate? And then if you have this turnover issue like we all do in the restaurant space, which is just part of being here, how does you keep it from the intellectual capital from just seeping out of the business? You train them, and then they leave. And then you got to train the next person, and then they leave. Is there a way that the AI can actually hold the intelligence so the team member or the individual can just do the task, right? And then if they walk out the door, that intellectual capital is somewhere kept in the restaurant and to be, passed on a little bit as they learn it, but basically can be there and actually be the brain. I don't know what that looks like yet. I'm still formulating in my head on how that would all be put together, but I think computer vision is part of that. Right?
Perfect. All right, let's move to pitfalls. So maybe if you can give us a couple of short bullet points on pitfalls to avoid. Wade, we'll start with you.
Okay, I got to think about this first.
Leon, if you have anything, jump in. Is there anything that you're like, oh man, shouldn't have done that? Or if I had to redo that, well, big
Yeah.
decision. Well, anything that you would roll back, or anything that you put in an SOP and be like, well, next time if I'm gonna redo this, here's where I'm gonna start first.
Well, it's very interesting. So I think every project has a level of regret, right, at some point, right? And with me, I always operate with the notion of, if I'm going to put in a system, I'm going to put in a system for the long term, right? Not for right now. And just so that I don't have to replace that system 3 years from now, right? Because when you're busy replacing systems, you're too busy to innovate, right? And I want to be on the innovation side of things. So, and it's really easy to lose sight of innovation or your capacity to innovate when you're constantly replacing systems. So, but with that said, I'm also not afraid to rip something out and put something new in, right? Because it's like, if it's a tiny pain point right now, it's going to be a huge debilitating pain a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now. So you should avoid that. But don't make any knee-jerk reactions, obviously, because sometimes we do have some knee-jerk reaction to technology and we rip it out when it was just fine, right? Maybe you're going through a bad, patch of luck with the vendor or something. But build the systems. Don't let regret set in so much. See the glass half full. And then if it's a mistake, own up to it, right? Because we're human. At the end of the day, we're human. We all make mistakes. Just own up to it, put something new in, and make damn sure that thing works. Because if you fail twice on the same project, I don't think you're gonna have a job anymore.
In my past, my younger years, I got hoodwinked by some vaporware in multiple facets that. I shouldn't call it vaporware. It was a function. They were functioning solutions, but they were not what was sold to me. And so, and the thing that's the worst about that is that from an operations standpoint, you have this trust that you want the vendor partners to tell you what really is going on. And it's okay if the technology doesn't work the way it's supposed to, but it could work the way, or in 18 months it will work. If that transparency is there, the systems do fine because you can set expectations. The frustration is when it will do everything and mow the lawn, and you fall for it, and you get it in there, and you're like, I've misset my expectations, I've misset my franchise expectations, I've misset the board expectations, and now you're in this like hostile relationship with a vendor who keeps promising, and you can't make that promise deliver. And so now, as I've gotten older, I think the thing that I've really, I love this industry, and I love the innovation that's come in the last 10 years. But the thing that I always ask the partners that I'm about to do business with is, you need to tell me right now, as transparently as you can this do what it says it can do? Or will it do what you say it can do at some point? And I'm okay with either one of those. Just help me set the expectation, because if you've ever been on the operations side and you got a board in your grill and you've got a CEO who's up your shorts about something and you've got everybody else in your chili because you can't deliver on something, it is the worst feeling. And the first person that you're going to go after is the vendor that gave you the promise that it just is inaccurate. So my regret comes from not doing my due diligence in the past and listening to rainbows and unicorns and butterflies when I should have listened to the reality.
Leon, anything to add to that? I know we were having this exact same discussion yesterday, that vendors are over-promising, under-delivering, and why can't they just be upfront and just say, look, back to Wade's point, we don't have it, we do the same thing. We have this massive vision that we want to implement in the industry. We're not there yet, but we're doing these steps, and as you can see from the last 2, 3, 4 years, here's how far we've come. So anything to add to this topic?
No, I think Wade absolutely killed it with his explanation. I mean, it's, you make that mistake once, I'm sure you
don't do it again.
Never do it again.
Perfect. All right, we've got a few minutes, I think, maybe for Q&A, if anybody has any questions. If not, we'll start with you, gentlemen, on that side.
Hi, Dave Gendel. I'm just curious, when you look at the chart with all the different vendors and applications and systems and everything, how do you, if everyone's got a little disparate platform, let's say, how do you bring that all together? I mean, I know that.
The famous
Dude, if you have the
integration.
answer
Yeah.
to that, I would love to have
Yeah.
a conversation afterwards. So I would say the toughest thing right now is integrations, because I am a huge believer, and I'll let Leon talk to his belief, but I'm a big believer on having the solution I can afford, within the best that I can afford, own its sphere of influence, and then trying to sew them together through integrations. Because I think you get the best, right? It's like a sprint. It's like a 400-meter sprint. I can have 100 meters by the best solution providers that are going to run that race. I just got to get the baton passed between all of them to get to the finish line. I like to roll that way. I think there are others who will say, I'll buy one solution that's just, they're going to run that entire race by themselves. But the integration piece is the toughest. We're getting better with the technology and the APIs and the ability to write to endpoints and people understanding how this works. That still is the battle every day. We just rolled a MarTech system. Great providers. The integrations they're good, but they're not as tight as I want them, because that's what success looks like.
Do you see, if I can follow it, just on if everyone's doing like a SaaS model or something, so you're all charging something, does that come into play somehow? So everyone is charging for their value, but if you integrate that into one system, how does that value propagate?
Yeah, I think that's part of the big discussion is cost. And if I have to pay a SaaS solution to 5 providers and I could pay a lower SaaS rate to one provider that can do all 5 of those things, that's a win. The problem I will tell you, any operator will tell you, golden handcuffs. We get super nervous when you have to put all your eggs in one basket, and then you have a conversation with that vendor and they're like, yeah, we know those 3 don't work, but these 2 are really good and you can't get away now because you're locked into this contract. And you're like, okay, when this contract is up in 3 years, which is not a good solution. But I don't have a great answer. I would tell you the ideal solution is to have a provider that you trust and isn't going to take you to the cleaners and can provide the full solution. I've yet to find that being as strong as it needs to be in the industry today. And so there's still this opportunity for a handful of providers you can sew together.
Excellent, thank you.
Go ahead.
When assessing vendors, when do you guys take the approach of picking a large company versus a startup?
Ooh.
That's a great question.
My answer to that is it depends. And I tend to, it depends on the technology, but I tend to lean towards not so much the startup where like you have technology but no customers, but I'm okay being their largest customer, assuming that I've done my due diligence and their technology is solid, and all they're looking for is that one big brand that's going to then catapult them. Great for them, like great for me, right? Because during the time where I implement that solution and they get catapulted and their attention shifts away from me, I can also have some influence on the way that piece of software is kind of formed. And Dave's is notorious for doing that with a multitude of vendors, right? Because technology is it's moving and growing so fast that, back in the day, you used to go with the big guy, right? He's tried and true and he's done it. But nowadays, there's so much really solid technology that you should be looking at from the startups, and that's what's going to set you ahead, and not the big honkin' like NCRs of the world or the Oracles of the world. Because guess what? Because those guys are really, really fat, and their innovation is really, really slow.
Yep.
And they're answering to, God knows, thousands of businesses, right? Versus the smaller guy that wants to succeed with you and grow with you and is listening. That's the biggest thing, right? You have to pick a vendor that wants to listen to you, right? Like a lot of solution providers have an ego about, I built this thing and it's the greatest thing. It's great. It is great. But you also need the restaurateur's influence to make it even better, right? So you have to pick an organization that's also listening. And I think there's a lot to win there in the industry when you partner up with a smaller guy.
By the way, he's absolutely. We've worked for the past year, almost a year exactly to date, to build this innovative solution around connectivity. And thanks to you guys, we're rolling that out and we built it and we've proven it and etc. So kudos to you guys and hats off to you for helping us build that.
See, he listened.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. Great panel. Moderating.
Thank you.
Jen from Q. You both talked about technology not being a golden bullet, right? Like being so important, how do you prioritize change management in your organization? How do you socialize that and talk about that? And how important is that throughout the process of what you're doing with technology?
I focus on the problem, right? And I bring the technology in as a solution. For instance, we're moving to Q on the POS front, right? Because we had a problem. And I'm not going to go into the problems because our prior POS provider was good, but we outgrew them, right? And so no organization, I don't care who you work for, wants to swap out POS because that is just, that completely annihilates you. And so that's the world we're living in today. But we had a problem, right? And if we didn't solve for that problem, then we're going to have an issue with shuttling data back and forth. And the POS is really the nucleus of the restaurant, right? Yeah. It literally, if your POS isn't solid, forget about CDP and everything else that we talked about, because it's like you can't get data out of there or pushed into there. You know what I mean? And it's just, it creates chaos. So that's the angle that I took, is that whatever POS solution we pick, it has to be very easy for you to connect to, share data across, and it has to have the ability to do the data pushing and pulling at an exponential rate, because the data sharing across platforms isn't slowing down. In fact, it's speeding up, and things are becoming a lot more right now versus like, you know what I mean? Like reports that you used to look at the next day for prior day business are no longer good. You know, you wanna look at what's happening in my restaurant right now so that I can pivot right now. And that's the game we're in. So that's how I approach it essentially.
We'll take one more question. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, my whole job now is change management. So we pick the right tech. I lean on the people who pick the right tech now. I evaluate it because I'm a closet CIO now. But then I go, okay, how do we get the organization to adopt it and to allow it to be accepted? And it's a lot of work. It's a ton of work.
Any other questions from anyone? One last question. Okay, perfect. We'll continue the conversation at our booth. If you guys are interested, the guys will be at our booth during the lunch hour, booth 219. And we're actually, we're going to make a quick announcement on what we're doing. We're finding and we're opening our doors for 3 innovators in the restaurant industry, wanting to put our entire full force of our staff, our technology behind these 3 brands that we want to help them scale and go to the next level. So if you're interested, find me at the booth and let's have a conversation. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.